Step A in building a website is figuring out what tools you're going to use to actually compose your website. There are lots of different tools out there, and really you should start with the simplest tool that got the whole thing started. There's this thing called AOL Press. Just download it. When you do that, install it, fire it up, and this is the first screen that you get. The big picture is this thing looks and feels just like Microsoft Word. There aren't a lot of complications. Again, it's very easy to use. Okay, so if you want to download AOL Press, here it is. Just go to your CD, find the AOL Press folder, and double-click that file, exe, and install this beast on your computer. There's a help file in PDF format also. Exit from that little window that shows you all of the little help links. Go under File, select New Page, and what it will do is create a new page for you. Just like in Microsoft Word where you want to create a new document. You're starting from scratch. When you select it, basically a new page is created for you. If you take a look at it, the background color is kind of gray looking, and up at the top it has like a title, and it says please title this page, and then it has the location of where it's going to save this page on your hard drive. What we're going to do is initially basically set up this page so you have a white background and you have a title. The title is the thing that appears when people bookmark your page. Okay, so you really need to make sure that you're going to title this particular page so when people visit it, if they bookmark it, they can get back to it. It's got some kind of reasonable name. Select Format up at the top, and what you're going to do is you're going to pick Page Attributes. That's where we're going to set the colors of the background color so it's not gray, and you can set other page attributes, but I'm going to take you there first and do that one simple thing. Make the page white. So here you are, you're at the Page Attributes setting window. What you want to do is you want to go to Background Color, upper left hand corner where it says Color, select Pick, and just pick white and hit OK. So basically I selected the white page background, the silly thing turned white, and up at the title I put in my travels across Earth. Next I'm going to go off and I'm just going to save this thing. Even though I haven't done anything yet, I'm going to save it. It's just the way I am. The save is a little bit different than what we're used to from the other applications. If you take a look at this window, basically lower left hand corner, it's showing what drive to select. Typically you have the C drive. And what I do is I'll just select my C drive and everything gets reset to the highest level of my C drive. If you take a look, it's showing the current directory, which happens to be AOL Press. If you did nothing, if you just hit the OK button, what it would do is it would save inside of C, AOL Press, and then it gave it a default page number there. I think it's page0.html. Again, what you want to do here is you want to pick a location on your C drive where you're going to save all of your web pages. My recommendation is that you create a place called Z Places, and underneath Z Places you create another directory called Web. And right at that point, right underneath Web, you want to save your very first page and call it index.html. Your first page is the page that everyone will go to. You should always name it index.html. That's the only requirement you have on names, unless, of course, you don't want to mix upper and lowercase names. But the point is, the index page is the one that gets loaded when people come to your site. So it's important that you use that name if that's the page you want your visitors to see first when they arrive at your site. You see that dot over there above autosave? That's actually a very important thing that we need to understand. Dot, when you select that, it basically means to go up a directory level. So we're actually inside of C AOL Press, and AOL Press is a directory. If you were to go and select those two dots right there, just double click them or select them and say OK, it would take you up to the C drive essentially. You'd be above the AOL Press directory. Keep that in mind. That basically represents, hardcore computer industry lineage there. That's what FTP will include, and you'll see that in your travels as you continue down this path. So here we are. What I did is I already had a directory called Z Places. I actually created a directory called web by clicking on the create directory button on the lower right hand corner, and up at the top the whole thing kind of went weird, and I typed web up at the top and then I said create. That button's not visible here, but that's what it said. And then basically it went automatically into the directory called web. The first page I'm going to save is index.html. Now, I started to say earlier that you don't have any issues associated with names. That index.html was a special name. That was the only issue. There are other issues. You don't want to mix upper and lowercase letters. Keep everything lowercase. It gets too complicated when you start to put case sensitivity in. Also, when you upload pages in the future, I'm going to show you how to upload pages to your web hosting service provider. Sometimes those companies will take all of your titles and they'll make them all lowercase. So keep everything lowercase. The next thing is, don't use any strange characters. If you need to separate things, don't use underscore, use a dash. An underscore will work, but you'll get very confused as you go further down this path because you can't always see that underscore. You can always see a dash. So use dashes, use letters, you can put numbers in and stuff like that. Okay, you're probably wondering, should I save it as HTML or HTM? Basically, Billy Gates started a war. He's still engaged in war. All of his products use HTML as the extension for web-related stuff, web pages. But the reality is all of the standards support both HTML and HTM. I would use HTML. So basically you just start typing, and up at the top you'll see that there's different options. One of the options is called format. Format does just that. It takes your text and it creates different formats. There's a category called headings. If you see, I picked heading 1, 2, 3. There's a category called color. Pick your colors. And then there's different styles. There's bold, italic, and a whole bunch of other styles. And again, all of this stuff is available under format. Once you get good at this, you can experiment across the top with all of the different other options up there. Again, it's not that different from Microsoft Word. If you've been using Word or PowerPoint for years, this will come very naturally to you. And you just start typing. There is some interesting things that exist in HTML. This is called hypertext markup language, by the way. And this is the way documents were actually produced before the land of Microsoft Word. There were these markup languages that existed. In any case, if you take a look, there are these buttons across the top. These are like toolbar buttons. And like there's a thing here that looks like a line. Well, every so often on web pages you'll see these lines that will go and break along text. So that's one unusual thing that you don't have, for example, in word processing. And yet you'll see that on the web pages. People will block out things with lines. There's a table option up here. We're all kind of familiar with tables. And the tables, are very similar. You got rows and you got columns. You stick your stuff in your rows and columns, and voila, the thing lines up in a table. Initially, I would avoid using tables until you get a little bit more familiar with, how the text comes together with the images. Okay, we're going to go and start to address some of the other issues that we all know and love about the web, like how do we put an image in, how do we put links in, and so on. Okay, so let's say you want to insert some pictures. What you would do is you would select element up here. There's actually a quick button up there. It's right next to the chain. In any case, you can experiment with the buttons later on. Whatever you can do with the menus up above, you can do with the buttons in the center. And oh, by the way, you can add and subtract more buttons just by clicking on that gray area. Just right-hand click on that gray area, and you should be able to add and remove buttons. Also, I think in the tools area there's an option that allows you to add and remove buttons. In any case, we want to add a picture. To add a picture, you click on element, you scroll down to image. When you select on the image location, this little dialog box pops up, and basically there's a button here called Browse. The assumption is that your image exists someplace on your hard drive, and your image is either a JPG, or it's a .gif, JPEG or GIF. Now GIF images are typically used for line art. JPEG images are used for photographs. Okay? Find where your images are, put them in some directory inside of your web directory that we've created. A lot of people will create a folder called images, and they keep all their images in that folder. I'm sloppy. I keep the images all over the place. There's an advantage to keeping all of your images in a special folder, however. For example, some people will use your images to connect up to your website so that they can essentially get free images on their websites. And there's a way to stop them from doing that if you save your images in a special folder called images. I don't worry about that, but maybe you need to worry about that. And so when you structure your folders, the way you lay out your website, maybe you want to create an images folder. Anyway, you're going to go find your image someplace by pressing browse. Okay? And what you have here are, down at the bottom end of this dialog box, are different options. This alignment thing is actually pretty cool. If you select left, the image will be to the left of the text. If you select right, it's going to put the image to the right of the text. Top, bottom, and middle identifies where the text will start. Okay, so it's kind of, you need to experiment there and get a feel for it. And the best way to experiment is make sure you have a lot of text, like a whole paragraph where you're saying something. And then select the different options on this image, and you'll see it flying around on different parts of the screen. This show link border. We all know about how we will go and click on an image, and it loads a whole new page or a different image or something like that. If this option is enabled, basically that image has a little border around it. Okay? And that border represents the link border, essentially. If you don't want a border and you still want the image to be linkable, you uncheck that. A lot of people will do that because it makes the image look prettier. It sort of blends into the background of the document as opposed to having a harsh border around it. So in that case, what do? I select Show Link Border. I usually select bottom for my images. I of course, browse, I pick my image, and I'll hit OK, and the whole beast loads in. So I just inserted two images. I inserted the Philadelphia Art Museum in the upper left-hand corner, and then I inserted a little arrow right below it for use format for different formats or something like that. If you notice, the text started at the lower bottom of this image over here. That makes sense for the arrow, but it doesn't make sense for the art museum. What you can do is you can change that art museum. Remember I said there were different positions you can stick it in? You can double click that, and that image dialog box will show up, and you can select a different option for how to align the text in the image, and we're going to do that. So I double clicked my art museum image, and I got a little border around the silly thing. It's like in dashed lines. And with the border around it, I took my mouse and I right-clicked it, and it opened up this little dialog box. Could have gotten the same thing by going under Element in the main menu and selecting Image after I had double-clicked and selected the art museum. And if you notice, I'm picking this button over here called Floating Left. You also notice it put dimensions in there. It went and automatically calculated the dimensions in there. You should never go and put those numbers in there yourself, because you'll always get the wrong aspect ratio and the image will look ugly. The other thing is, you should always use the appropriate size image. You shouldn't shrink images by using these dimension settings over here, because that's wasting bandwidth, and your page will load a lot slower if you do those kinds of things. So take a look what happened. All of my text wound up essentially lining up with the image, where the image is completely on the left-hand side and the text is wrapping around on the right. It's very different than your Microsoft Word, isn't it? Well, it turns out that this is closer to the publications tools that are used to create commercial publications such as magazines and newspapers than your Microsoft Word. Your Microsoft Word comes from a lineage called word processing. And it's, believe it or not, with all of the fancy things Microsoft Word can do, it's not as sophisticated as publication tools that are used to produce commercial journals. HTML, its lineage, its roots are in the publications industry. That's why you can do some of these kinds of things. Believe it or not, we're almost done with everything you need to create a good working website. You know how to put text in, you know how to format it, you know how to insert images, you know how to format the images around the text. The next step is to talk about links. What I've done is I've added some text up at the top. There's home, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and I've highlighted home. We're going to create a link for home, and you know what? We're going to make this our home page. Just like before, we go into our element main menu area, except in this case we're going to select the link option. When you pick that link option, this little dialog box pops up. And it's very similar to the other dialog boxes. If you notice, there's a button here called Browse. When you select that, it will take you inside your hard drive and you pick what page you actually want to be loaded when someone clicks on that link. You can type it in if you remember it. I wouldn't recommend typing it in. I would always select the Browse button. There's another area on this little dialog box. It's called Append Anchor Name. You know how sometimes you're on a web page and you click on it and it really doesn't load another web page? Instead, what it does is it scrolls down someplace into the center of that web page or towards the bottom of that web page. That's what anchor is about. Okay? What you would do is you would use the element option to go define an anchor someplace in the middle of your document. I'll talk about it. And then over here you would put that anchor name. But right now we're going to be talking about linking. So again, we're going to hit the Browse button. We're going to find a file to load when someone clicks on that link called Home. So I picked that Browse button and our old dialog box showed up that has to do with like saving a file or opening a file. It looks the same. Okay, and I actually picked the index.html page. I want that to be my home page. So whenever anyone clicks home, it always takes me to my index page. Whenever anyone goes to my website, it takes me to that index page. So that's my home page, and that's what home is going to be about. I selected it. I'm going to hit OK, and that link is going to become now live. So now if you take a look, home is that funky color that links are colored, and it's got an underline associated with it. It's now a live link. I'm now going to create another page, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the Africa page. Now when I go and create another page, what I do is I take a look at what I already have, because I may have an awful lot that like would apply to Africa, like all the text that I have in here, or maybe the links that I have up at the top. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to save this entire page exactly like it is, but I'm going to call it africa.html. So here's the deal. I went off and I just saved the page as africa.html, and I changed the title to Africa. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to swap out that image with some image of Africa that I have, and then I'm going to start changing the text. And then I'm going to go up there and I'm going to start to update the links that I have. Before we insert that very special image from Africa, I wanted to show you the directory structure. Again, if you notice, there's a thing called Z Places, Web, Images. If you notice, we have a large number of images over here on the right hand side. Some of those images are pretty large. Back in the old days, you really didn't want to have an image that was greater than about 30 kilobytes, and you really didn't want to have a web page that was larger than about 100 kilobytes. Things are a little bit different today with high-speed internet access, but you know what? You should still be very conscious of the sizes of your images. And there's an excellent tool out there called IR Fan View. Okay? And it should be part of this CD. If not, you really should download IR Fan View and use that to manage your images. You can resize it, change formats, you can do all kinds of wonderful things, and it's a free tool. And it's IR FAN VIEW. Just do a search on the web, you'll find it, you can download it, and again, it's on this CD along with the fundamental tool AOL Press and another tool that I'm going to be getting into, File Transfer Program. Okay? But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to wind up inserting one of these images over here, and I don't know if I'm going to clean up this image or not. We'll see before we insert it. Okay, so on your computer or on your CD, here's the folder that contains IR Fan View. Just install that beast on your computer. Double click it, it will create icons for you. Fire it up and use it. When you turn it on, what you want to do is you want to select the thumbnails option. It's underneath a file. And then just go surfing to the different drives, like if you have a C drive or whatever, and start looking for pictures. It's really fast when it puts those pictures up there. And then just go through the top menus and you'll see that you can convert and save pictures and resize them and do all kinds of really cool things really fast. If you noticed, our directory showed all kinds of different images, but you know what? They were not all JPEG format and they were not all GIF format. They were also bump format and other formats. If you take a look in the lower left hand corner over here, it says list file of type, and I have image selected over here. So again, those are the two image formats that are accepted on the internet with this HTML stuff. Now you can select and say show all file types, and it will show you all of those images, including the bumps. But if you load in one of those bump files, it's not going to display for you properly. The web servers that are running out there, they know how to deal with the GIFs and the JPEGs. They don't know what to do with a bump image. So here we are with our cute little image. There's actually an interesting story behind this image. If you take a look, you'll see one camel loaded on the back of a pickup truck, and you'll see another camel. It looks like it's having some problems, a little bit of bleeding. Well, sometimes these camels can become very stubborn, and what this gentleman is trying to do is basically load the camels on the back of this pickup truck. And one of the methods that's used to persuade a stubborn camel to get on the back of a pickup truck is to abuse it. It's the best way to describe it. So this poor camel had the heck pounded out of it. Someone socked it in the mouth a couple of times, but it's still being obstinate. In any case, on this page I also created a link to Africa up at the top. So now we have two links. We have one to home and we have one to Africa. And when we click between the two of them, the pages will switch back and forth. So this is how you do it. This is how you build up your website. We now know how to create content. We know how to load images. We know how to change images. I mentioned a tool called IR Fan View for reformatting images. You can go off and use one of your tools, but again, I would recommend using IR Fan View. The next step is to basically send it out to the internet, to publish it. That's the term that's used. Okay, and we're going to use a very simple program, very early program, just like AOL Press. It's called FTP. Okay, so I basically went off and clicked the home link, and it took me back to my home page, my travels across Earth. And back at my home page, my Africa link still was not active, because remember, I set it up on the Africa page, but not on this page. So I double-clicked the Africa link, and I made it active. I could have just as easily selected it, copied it when I was on the Africa page, and when I clicked on home, I could have come over here, double-clicked on Africa, said paste, and there would have been my link. So, you know, just like in Word, you can use copy and paste to knock out a lot of different work and not go back into the formatting menus. You can do the same thing here. You can use copy and paste of links, you can use copy and paste of images, and so on. Now, I didn't talk about the anchor, but it's really not that important. If you go under Element and you select Anchor, you select any of this text over here, like italic or bold, you give it an anchor name. It doesn't matter what you call it. And then if you stick a link someplace on that page with that anchor name, when you click on that link, it'll take you directly to where your anchor is, like bold or italic. Again, you can experiment on your own. This stuff is pretty simple. In my humble opinion, AOL did two very important things to basically turn themselves into the huge giant that they became. One is they created this very simple browser that allowed housewives to essentially create their own web pages. The other is they essentially established a web server and they made it available for free. Turns out they really didn't need to have that web server to turn themselves into a powerhouse company, but they needed an ability for people to create web pages very easily. And I'm going to go back again and say that you should go back over here. This is the roots. Use this to build your web page if it's the first time you're doing it. Get good at using this thing. Then you can go and examine some of the fancier tools out there. But beware. Most of those fancy tools, it's really about companies trying to create proprietary information. They're not interested in the internet. They're not interested in you creating a really nice web page. They're more or less interested in locking up the markets. So anyway, the next step is to do FTP. We have a mini website over here. It has 2 pages. It has some images. We want to pump it out to the rest of the planet so they can access it. The next step is to basically publish your web page out on the internet. And on the drive or on the CD, there's an FTP program. It's called 3270. I have a little area highlighted over here in blue. That's the executable. Just create a shortcut of this beast and put it on your desktop. What you'll do is you'll double click this, and this will allow you to transfer your website that you created on your local computer and publish it out on the big brain so other people can get a hold of it. So when you double click the FTP program, you get this little window that pops up. Basically, this profile name, it represents different connections that you can have, and so you can name the connection whatever you want. You set it up and you save it, so you can have you can have a couple of hundred connections connecting to different servers around the planet. This is the host name. Typically it would be something like www.yourdomainname.com. Most people are running Unix out there, so I would select Unix, and you have a user ID and a password. This is basically the path that you would follow on the computer that you're connecting to. This is the company that's going to be hosting your web pages. And moving on down, load PC, we basically see that that's where you should point to on your drive. On the right hand side, you can see that there's save password and autosave configuration. Anyway, you set up these parameters, you hit OK, and eventually you wind up connecting to the big brain out there. There's one more setup that you need to do. Press the advanced button on that previous tab. When you do that, this little window pops up. Basically make it look like this window over here. Okay, so when you finally connect up to the big brain, basically what you have is you have your local computer on the left hand side. It says local system. Remember those dot dots I was telling you about? You can navigate up and down the directory tree. So the top white window is basically going up and down the different directories. The bottom white window on the left hand side shows the files. And again, the whole left hand side is your computer. The whole right hand side is the computer out on the internet. These are the people that you're paying to host your web pages. Now when you want to transfer this stuff, basically you have a left arrow and you have a right arrow. And you can pick up stuff from your web hosting company and load it onto your computer, and you can send stuff from your computer to your web hosting company. Now there's 3 options down at the bottom. One is called ASCII, the other is called binary, and the other is called L8. Basically what you want to do is you want to select ASCII for all HTML files, and you want to select the binary for everything else. Things like Word document, Excel, PowerPoint, all of your images, all of your audio, all of your video. ASCII is just that. It's basically non-binary data, and if you were to open it up in the text editor, you wouldn't see any funky characters. It would just be A, B, C, all the way up to Z, and then the numbers and punctuation marks. So again, when you send these files back and forth, make sure you have ASCII or binary selected appropriately. If you downloaded a newer version of this thing, there's actually an automatic detect, and it will figure out and automatically switch. What you would do is you would select your files either one at a time or whole groups. You can select whole groups of files on the left and on the right hand side, and you can transfer appropriately. There's buttons on here for creating directories, deleting files, and so on. It's pretty self-explanatory. You know, once you upload your file, you immediately want to go and basically surf. Open up your browser, try to take a look at the file you just uploaded. Make sure everything hangs together. Lots of times your pictures will be broken because, again, you may have used the wrong kinds of naming convention. Maybe you put capital letters in and all the capital letters were made lowercase letters. Now all of a sudden your images don't work. You may have put spaces in names. Spaces are a no-no. You should never have any spaces in any names. That's about it. Basically you're done. We know how to author, we know how to publish, and that's all there is. Have fun.